We're going to go ahead, if you would, and let's go ahead and turn to number 136. Are you washed in the blood? We're going to do the first and the last verse, okay? Again, 136. It's a holiday weekend. I know a lot of people are kind of, I'm not sure they even know what they're doing. Sometimes they're just going somewhere. But I hope everybody did have a good afternoon. But Ed, would you open us up a word of prayer, please, when you get a chance there?
Father, God, we're thankful for another chance to be here tonight, Lord, to sing praises to you and worship your name. Father, we pray for those who might be on the road, whatever the case might be, and open our hearts tonight, each and every one of us, Lord, that we can be aware and open to what you have to say for us this night. Hopefully we take it to someone in the world here that needs to know about you. In Jesus' name, praise.
Amen. Before we do our next song, we're going to turn to 139, so just a couple pages back. Before we get there, I just remind our deacons that we do have a deacons meeting Tuesday. It's already September, so we'll have our deacons meeting Tuesday at 10 o'clock, so please come be part of that, okay? So again, Tuesday for our deacons meeting at 10 o'clock. So come, number 139, At the Cross. Again, we'll do the first and the last. We're gonna stop right there. It's interesting that I used to lead music consistently up until 2005, so it's been a little while, and I'm very thankful for those who know how to do it. That's all I have to say, okay? Can anybody kind of help me out about last week? What were we talking about? Who specifically were we talking about? Esther. I heard somebody say that. Okay, so let's talk about Esther for just a few moments. Let's talk about what happened what happened in chapter 1. If you remember, there's two parties taking place in chapter 1. Okay, there was Ahasuerus' party, and then Queen Esther, and Vashti had her party. Okay? So what happened in Vashti's party? Does anybody know? She wouldn't dance. There was not a lot going on as far as we know. We don't know any idea of what was happening in her party. But what was happening in Xerxes, Ahasuerus', whichever, again, if you're a Greek or if you're the Hebrew, what was taking place in his party?
They were all,
What's that?
they were all drinking and they were merry.
Yep, they were all drinking and merry. Absolutely. They were having a good old time. What's that?
He was showing off.
Yep, he was showing off what? What was he showing off?
He wanted to show his wife.
Yes, he wanted to show her off, but he showed off the riches and everything else that he had. Okay? And so now we have a king who got talked into something. What did he get talked into? Do you remember?
Punishment.
Okay, punishment for the queen. Now, what was the reason for her punishment? What was the reason these eunuchs and others came up? These governors and all these people.
So all the other women would follow her.
Okay, they were afraid that the women of the 127 provinces, if you remember, that covers basically 17, 18 countries present day. That's how big it was. They were concerned that the women of the kingdom would follow her example. Okay? So, of course, how do you fix something when you don't get your way? How do you do that? Because that's what happens. He didn't get his way, so what happened? He called in his helpers, right? He called in his emotional support people so he could feel better about himself. And what did they do?
They decided on punishment.
Right, okay? And it wasn't just any type of punishment. It was a reaction to a behavior, right? She didn't get a trial, did she? No. She didn't get to defend herself. It was simply, in fact, it's verse 14 of chapter 1. You have Karshina and Shethar and Admatha and Tarshish and Meres and Marsina and Mumakin and 7 other of the officials of Persia and Media who had access to the king's presence. They sat down and said, hey, this is what we're going to do. So they determined her punishment based upon what they thought, based upon really to who they would really want to impress.
Their wives.
Now, who did the eunuchs and the others want to impress? The king. Okay, so now we see where he follows through with that. So remember, guys, a knee-jerk reaction to something, and that's what this is. Okay, the difference is they're going to surround it with. I'm going to talk to advisors, right, to try to justify what it is that we're going to do. So here we see a knee-jerk reaction. Whose life was truly affected by it? The queen's. Okay? She was affected by their reaction because she wouldn't dance in some provocative way, right? That's what happened. So now, if we see here in verse 19 of chapter 1, it says, if it pleases the king, let a royal edict be issued by him and let it be written in the laws of Persian Media. They're like, hey, king, why don't you put a law out? And whose law really was it? I mean, he signed it, but whose was it? Theirs. They're like, we'll show this queen, okay? And so now we've gotten to the point where the letter was sent at the end of chapter 1, that the edict actually was sent, and it was sent in the languages of the provinces of where the people were, so that way they couldn't go, hey, we didn't understand, what was said. And now we're finding the king in verse 1 of chapter 2. Listen to what it says. After these things, remember, that's everything that took place in chapter 1, okay? Everything that took place. When the anger of the king had subsided, he coming to his senses here, okay? We can add a little bit to that too. His embarrassment's gone. His friends are gone, all right? He doesn't have all this other stuff going on around him. He remembered Vashti and what she had done and what had been decided regarding her. The king's attendants who served him said, let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. And may the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom and have them bring every beautiful young virgin to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, and to the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let their cosmetics be given to them. Okay, so the first things first here. What does the king realize happened? What's taking place here? If you look at verse 1. What's that?
You realize He didn't have a queen anymore.
Right, the queen's gone. Okay? And so he's sitting on his throne like, didn't think that one through. And of course, who comes in to fix his problem? The same people who created the problem, just so you know. Okay? All right, so here we see this taking place. And it's interesting here because the way verse 1 reads, I don't know how you guys read that verse, but here's how I read verse 1. Verse 1 reads very simply that some decisions people made about regarding her. Because was it his idea? No, it was not his idea. And so this is what we see here. Now the king was angry. Guys, if we make decisions based upon our anger, it will come back and bite us if we're not careful. Did you know that? Right? So the king here is like, I don't have a queen anymore. So again, the whole idea here is let's fix it. Go back up to verse, towards the end of verse 19 there of chapter 1. So it says, and let it be written in the laws of Persia and Media so that it cannot be repealed, that Vashti may not come into the presence of the king Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another one who is more worthy than she is. Okay, now what is it about the laws of the Medes and the Persians? Okay, they can't be changed. They can't be modified. They can't be appealed. Nothing. Okay, so the king has made this edict in verse 19 of chapter 1, and Vashti was literally, she was thrown out from the presence again of the king. Now we're not certain exactly what that completely entailed, but the odds are she was put off in some place away from the king so that he would never see her again. All right, and but I always find it interesting here that when we look at this, what is a harem? What's a harem? Trouble. Okay. But I mean, listen. When you read, especially the Middle East, and especially a long time ago, there was always a harem. What was the point of the harem? Everybody's like, I don't know how I'm going to answer that. Exactly right. That's the best way to answer it. Keep the king happy. Okay, that's all it was.
Pool of the king.
Right. Okay. And if you notice, the king had multiple, because that way he said, "Yeah, I'm done with you. I'm done with you." Right. That's literally what they would do, like trash. But literally here we see this, and as we're reading through here, I want you to notice what happens here. The king, once again, if you notice, it says, "And the king's attendants, the same attendants who are found in verse 14 of chapter 1, the same people who gave him this brilliant idea to get rid of Queen Vashti because I'm not convinced how much they must have been embarrassed about it as well, worried about it. Some people that were there. Now remember, eunuchs would have their only job was to do one thing, and that was to serve the king. That's all they did. Okay, so it wasn't really going to affect them at all. So now we see here they give this plan, and what's their plan? What's their brilliant plan? Okay, how are we going to get this new queen, Terry? What are we going to do?
Round up a bunch of young, pretty virgins to bring them in.
Okay. So, and not just in the city of Susa, right? If you notice there, it says where? Right. Throughout the whole kingdom, right? All the provinces. So he's got this idea. So I guess if you were ugly, you didn't get to become the queen, right? And if you weren't a virgin, you didn't get the queen either. Did you catch those? Those are two requirements. Those were two requirements. So my question is, and we can just play games with this a little bit. Who gets to determine who's pretty and who's ugly? Okay, men. But before they meet the king, they have to be pretty, and they have to be pretty and virgins, right? Before they meet the king, they do, because that was the two requirements that they had to have prior to coming before the king. Okay, so now we have this person. Okay, how many of you guys, ladies, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but how many of you have makeup at your house? I'm not going to ask the guys because I'm just not going there, okay? Only Gathel is brave enough to say I got makeup at home, okay? Okay, now my next question is why? I mean, I know the answer, but I just want to hear it. Why?
You want to do the best with what you have.
Okay, you want to do the best you have? Okay, that's okay. All right, so Well, because when I read these verses, I kind of smile at it. Okay? Okay, so look. So we have the edict goes out that Vashti was to be put aside. Then now we have another one going out. And it says there in verse 2, it says, let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king. And may the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom, and have them bring every beautiful young virgin to the citadel of Susa, to the harem, into the custody of Haggai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women. So now the king has somebody under him who's in charge of the women, whose job was to make sure that they were virgins and they were beautiful. Okay? Because he couldn't say, hey, king, you know, they brought this one in. Now, how they figured out if they were a virgin or not, I have no idea. Okay? But that was one of the requirements. Right? That was it. Why do you think that's the case? Purity. Okay? So now we have this going out. We have these young women that are coming back, and literally they were going to have their job was going to try to impress the king. Okay? What king do you remember in Israel had a whole bunch of wives and concubines? Solomon. Solomon had more than any. Solomon had more than any. Like, I don't know how many, 1,000, 700, whatever, a whole bunch. All right? Let's put it this way. He had enough women under him that Solomon could have had 2 different dates for a year with 2 different women every single night. Okay? He was a pretty busy guy. And got himself in trouble by that, by the way. Got himself pulled away from God. And here, though, we have a pagan king, right? He is not a believer in God. He is going after, I want to see what is beautiful. That's literally what he's doing here. Did you notice that? Doesn't care about their personality. Doesn't care if they're rich, poor, or otherwise. All he cares about is whether or not they are beautiful and they're virgins. That's the only 2 criteria that he set out.
Subservient.
What's that?
Subservient.
Right. Subservient, sure, that they would, right. Because, well, you already know they can't be like Vashti because they sent the paper out that says they can't, right? Okay? Because, you know, that'll fix everything. So now we see this taking place here, and literally, they would be placed literally in the house of women. That's what how do you say that name? Haggai, there in verse 3, that he is literally going to be there. So it's interesting because, you know, we really are so naive in America and around in the Western world about a lot of things. Okay? King Ahasuerus and Xerxes, that these people he was going to call up, they were either going to be a concubine or a wife. Okay? So, now I'm not saying that he didn't love some of them. Notice I said plural. Okay? I'm not saying that at all. But I promise you, had relations with many. Guaranteed it. That's why he had so many. Okay? That's why they had, somebody said family, that's why they had so many. Okay? Now in this case, I don't know if I want to say they were forced to do this, but if you're poor, and all of a sudden your daughter might be able to go to the kingdom, what are you going to say to your daughter? It's time to go. Okay? Maybe I think you're pretty enough to get there, to be there with the king and choose him as the next queen. So I just find it interesting, actually about makeup, because it tells us in verse 9, and it also tells us down in verse 12. I want you to listen to verse 12 of Esther chapter 2. It says, now when the turn came for each young woman to go into King Ahasuerus, after the end of her 12 months, under the regulations for women, they were being beautiful. Listen, they were supposed to be beautiful when they found them, right? That's what it said. They were supposed to be beautiful before they found them. Now they spent the last 12 months getting even more beautiful. At least that was the whole point of it, right? So, man, CoverGirl would have been going crazy if they had there, okay? I mean, they would have been like, man, 12 months of all this, okay? Okay, so they probably would have done everything from skin treatments, hair treatments, nail treatments. They would have probably had things like their diet to make sure they didn't put on weight, to make sure they looked a certain way, to make it through this, whatever it might have been. But this is what they're doing here, and literally, whichever one caught the king's eye, whichever one pleased the king the greatest, and you can fill in the blank on that how you want to, okay, pleased the king, that he would pick that person. So of course, a king who no longer has a queen says what about this idea that his guys made up? What does he say? Absolutely.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, great idea. Great idea. Okay? All right. So, but who's really putting whose hand in motion here?
God.
God is. God's going to have it set up where the children of Israel need to be taken care of. And who's going to do that? Esther. Right? See, remember, God is sovereign. We talked about that a while back, that God is sovereign. He's over every single molecule on the face of this earth, every single circumstance of the face of this earth in your life and in my life. So now we're going to get into another person. Okay. Remember, I don't believe for a second, because God is sovereign, that God puts people in a place by accident. Okay, that's why it's always interesting to me when I hear people say, I go to church, but there's nothing there for me to do. Well, there's multiple reasons that's possible. Okay, and one of those reasons is because you're not trying hard enough. I want you to be honest with you. Okay, when people say that. Second of all, here we need to see here that God puts us in a place for something. If you remember Mordecai, and we'll get to this not tonight, but we'll get to this. We might get it tonight. He told Mordecai told Esther, this was the reason you were born. Maybe this is why you were born. Okay? And then any of you guys go home and look up Hebrews chapter 10, verse 24? Anybody? It says as Christians, when people say, I have nothing, I can't serve in the church, I have nothing in the church, that church says we're supposed to encourage one another unto good deeds and love. So every Christian has a job. Okay, every Christian has a job, and so if you want a job with the title, I go work at Ford or Chevy, and you'll get a title. But God doesn't give us that title. He says we're supposed to encourage one another, good deeds and love. Okay, now here he says this is where they're at. Now look at verses 5 and 6. Okay, now we have more names coming in here, and I promise you that I'm going to butcher them. You've probably read them before and butchered them yourself. Okay, these are fairly easy, but there was a Jew at the citadel of Susa, whose name was Mordecai. All right, so Mordecai has now come into the picture. And if you ever notice when you're reading the Bible, it always does something. It always, when a name comes in, especially in the Old Testament, it always will tell you who they are, where they came from. Okay? So, if you notice here, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. So, Esther is a Jew. But more specifically, Esther is of the tribe of Benjamin. Okay? All right. And why? Because her uncle is a Benjamite, which means she is a Benjamite. Okay? So here we see her in there, who also was the tribe of Benjamin years later. Saul, the very first king of Israel. Okay? So now we see here, this edict has gone out, and all these things are there, and it goes on. Verse 6. And notice what it says. It describes to us why he is where he is. Okay? Who had been taken from Jerusalem with the exiles, who had been deported with Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had deported. So, Nebuchadnezzar was the original king who deported the children of Israel. And that now we see here that usually when people are deported, it's for reasons. A lot of times they're smart, they have ability to do things. Okay? So now we have Mordecai, who is a Benjamite, who is the uncle of everyone? Esther, who has heard this edict. But where is Mordecai? What town is he in? Does anybody know? Or city? He sits at the gate of the palace, by the way, that you give us away. Susa, okay? So he is there. So again, verses 5 and 6, they're at the citadel, the Jew at the citadel of Susa, whose name was Mordecai. This is where he was. He's of the exiles that are there. Again, he is not there by accident. He's there because Mordecai had legal responsibility over Esther, who Esther was going to be ultimately God's going to use to save the children of Israel from Haman's nasty plan. Okay? This is what is going to happen here. Mordecai was there. In fact, the whole thing here is, in fact, let's do this for just a moment here. I want you to go to, if you would, I want you to go back just a few, go backwards to 2 Kings for just a moment. Chapter 24. Okay? I want to show you so that if anybody would like to know exactly where this comes from, of why Israel's where they're at. 2 Kings chapter 24, it's verses starting in verse 6. Okay? So Jehoiakim lay down with his fathers, and his son Jehoiachin became king in his place. Now the king of Egypt did not come out of his land again, because the king of Babylon had taken everything that belonged to the king of Egypt, from the brook of Egypt to the river Euphrates. Jehoiachin was 18 years old when he became king, and he reigned for 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Nehushta, the daughter of Elnathan of Jerusalem. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, in accordance with all that his fathers had done. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, went up to Jerusalem, and the city came under siege. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to the city while his servants were besieging it. Then Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, but his mother, his servants, his commanders, and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him prisoner in the 18th year of his reign. He also brought out from there all the treasures of the house of the Lord. You remember the big party in chapter 1 of Esther? Okay, this is what we see this here. And then he said that Solomon, the king of Israel, had made in the temple of the Lord, just as the Lord had said. Then he led into exile all the people of Jerusalem, and all the commanders, and all the valiant warriors, 10,000 exiles, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None of them were left except the poorest people of the land. I ain't taking the poor people with us. We're leaving back. That's what they did. So he led Jehoiachin into exile to Babylon. All the king's mother, the king's wives, and the officials, and the leading men of the land, he led into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. And all the valiant men, 7,000, and the craftsmen and the smiths, 1,000, all strong and fit for war. Those two the king of Babylon brought into exile to Babylon. So what did they do? They took everything, right? They took everything, and if we think about this for just a moment, okay? We know that Mordecai is there. Who was the king? What did it say there in 2 Kings chapter 24? Who was the one? It says Jehoiachin, right? Who was how old? 18 years old. Not a lot of experience there to lead the country, but it happened over and over again to Israel, and led over and over again to bad decisions, over and over again. But exactly what we see here is that Mordecai, here's what's interesting, is they can trace Mordecai's great-grandfather back to Kish. Okay? So so it's interesting how that is. Kish, of course, is the one who we know the son of Kish was who? Saul. Okay? So now we have to understand this. Now, first of all, I want us to understand something about the captivity here. Mordecai had not just been carried off into captivity. Okay? It's quite interesting that how this works. That it's a belief here that this may have been many years after the original captivity took place, before this events here with Mordecai take place. But you have to remember, you have the Babylonians, the Syrians, you have the Medes, you have the Persians. They're always fighting over the same area, which is where? Does anybody remember? We talked about it. It's been a while ago. The Tigris and Euphrates River, present-day Iraq, present-day parts of Afghanistan, but primarily Iraq and Afghanistan. Iran, sorry, not Afghanistan, Iran. Over and over and over again, they fought over these lands. And they continue to this very day. But again, what happens? How many of you know exactly where your family heritage is? If you could do that, some people say we can say, well, Kentucky, but that's pretty general, or Tennessee, that's pretty general. What can we say about our families? Most of the time, we can only go back so far, right? Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time we can go back so far. My brother went back and he studied. He had somebody do the lineage for our family, and it goes all the way back to some duke in Scotland or somewhere over that way. So one of the things here is that after a while, we can forget, if you will, for lack of better words, where we're from. Okay, we can say I'm from, my ancestors are from England, so it's a big place. I don't know what address they lived at. I don't know who they were associated with. And so as we think about this for a moment, guys, it always bugs me when people use this phrase, African American or Native American, because they never acknowledge something. And I'm not trying to be racist or anything like that, because it's ignorance to say that. The reality is that we are Americans. It doesn't matter about our ancestry, because none of us lived where ancestors were. Did you? I didn't live in England. I'm not English American. I'm American. Okay? We are Americans. And we out of our ignorance, we forget where we come from, so we try to claim something that we've never claimed before. We don't know. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know my relatives. I'm not going to go back to England and go, hey, you're related to me. They're going to go, sure we are. Well, this piece, But the thing is that the further you stay away from something, the further you stay away from a country that you're from, your family you're from, and you start having kids, what happens? It diminishes, and what becomes their home? Where they're at, right? Where they're at. And that's what's happened here. That's why to this day, I can guarantee you, and I'm sure there's a way to figure this out, people way smarter than I am can figure this out, you'll find people of Jewish descent living in Iraq and Iran. I guarantee you will. Okay? Now, they're not going to like to hear that, but not everybody went back to Israel after the captivity. They liked it where they were. Okay? But that's just pure fact that we get in America, we get so offended over. Okay? That's just pure fact. And so here we see this, that we know that Mordecai he's responsible for her. He has no idea probably who all of his relatives were from way back when. Okay? It's possible, but probably not. But he knew who the closest relatives were. He knew that he had to take care of his who? His niece. Had to take care of her. That he did know. Okay? And one of the ways you do that, remember, is what? If you're poor and you have a chance to get rich, and the king wants to take you, okay. Okay, that's something that we need to remember. So in verse 7 here of Esther, it says this. It says, he was the guardian of Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother. Now the young woman was beautiful of form and face, and when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as her own daughter. So the moment he saw that there was, okay, I'll just be honest with you guys, a contest. Okay, there's a contest going on. He's going to say, no, there wasn't. Yes, there was. The king wanted to know who the most beautiful woman was. Bring her to me and I'll pick it out. I'll pick her out. Okay, that's exactly what he's doing. It's a contest. Okay? And who's going to win? We know who's going to win because we're reading the book of Esther. Okay? So Esther was a beautiful young woman. Okay? We don't need to read any more than that, do we? From that standpoint of who she was. A beautiful woman who what? God used. Okay? Who's going to save. This is who she was. And by the way, she didn't identify as a Babylonian. She didn't identify as those things because she wasn't. She was a Jew. You see, I was getting at earlier, guys, we got to identify who we are, not who we think we are, who we used to be. This is who we are. Okay? And this is who she is. She is a Jew, and she's proud of that fact. Okay, we'll find that out in just a little bit. Okay, so let's look at some of these things. What are we supposed to do? Let's go back for just a moment. Go to the New Testament for me. I want you to turn with me to 1 Timothy chapter 5. I wish it first. 1 Timothy chapter 5. Okay, in 1 Timothy chapter 5, you and I, we've studied this before, but what you find in this chapter is making sure how we honor and take care of one another. Okay? And so, for instance, it tells us, if you go down to verse 8 of 1 Timothy 5, it says, "But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever." So what is Mordecai doing here? What is he doing? He's taking care of his family the best he knows how. We don't have a right to say we know how to raise somebody's kid better than they do. We don't have a right to say I would have done this or I would have done that. Okay? Mordecai was only doing the best he knew how to do for his niece. Okay? He knew the best thing that he knew what to do. But again, we have the advantage of having the Bible. We have the advantage of knowing that God's in control. And this is why it's happening, right? But we need to remember here, his job, he's doing his best to take care of her. I mean, first of all, why did Israel get carried off into captivity? Disobedience, right. So they were disobedient to God, stopped trusting Him and following Him, and they got carried off into captivity. And now He's not going to continue that pattern, at least not with His family, and He's going to make sure she is taken care of. And so it is interesting because when you read more about Him, He didn't try to take advantage of that, did He? He did not. Okay, He wasn't the one that was going to be elevated, she was. Okay? Again, we're ahead of ourselves there, but that's we know what will happen. So He was going to take care of her, and that is something that we need to remember. Have you ever met people who are in want? Okay? You ever met people who are in need? And there's a difference between the two. Okay? Most people are in want, not in need. Okay? Because we blur the lines. A want is not a video game. A need is not a video game. That's a want. Okay? Having food on the table is a need. Having drinking water is a need. Those are not wants. Those are needs. So now here we see, with Esther, we see that she truly is one in need. Both her parents are dead. We just read that there in Esther. There in Esther chapter 2, that both of her parents had died. There it's verse 7. That both of her parents of Esther chapter 2, they had passed away. They had died. And now it's interesting here because he was going to provide for her. Okay? Why is it so hard? I mean, let's think about church for just a moment. It's interesting here. When Jesus Christ said there's always going to be the needy, what exactly was He getting at? And what priority did He place on those, do you think? Who are we supposed to take care of first and foremost?
Widows and children.
Now we're going to go even more specific than that. What's that? More specific than that. We're supposed to take care of the household of faith first. Okay? Household of faith first. We're not to neglect the household of faith and go help the world out here. Okay? The Bible said, I just read it to you. Paul said if we do that, we're worse than an infidel. Okay? All right, so I want us to think about this for just a moment. We have to look at this and try to apply this to who we are as a church, who we are as this. It is not saying, nor am I saying we're not supposed to help people. But we're not supposed to put the world and the needs of the world ahead of the needs of the Christian brothers and sisters, especially of the household of faith, the Bible tells us. Okay? I just read it to you back in when Paul wrote that to Timothy. Okay? That's something we need to remember here. So Mordecai didn't do this. He didn't go, you know what? Hey, Rex, I want you to take her for me. He said, what? I'll do it. He did it. He didn't expect somebody else to do it. He did it. And he made sure that she was going to be taken care of. And that's something we need to remember. That we need to have to understand here that we as a church, we are obligated to help each other first and foremost. Okay? And then once that is taken care of. And not blindly either. Okay? That's something that we need to understand. and truly try to remember that we have to reach out and to well, help people. But let's be honest, how many times have we helped people outside of the church, they disappear and never see them again? We know. We probably can't count how many times. Okay? And people say, well, that's what our job is to do. Our job is not to be taken advantage of. That is for certain. It is not to be poor stewards. And when we're taken advantage of by people, that's a poor steward. We need to think things through and make sure, and I think we do a pretty good job with that. I really do. So now we've gotten to Mordecai. He's doing his responsibility, making sure this relative of his is being taken care of. And he's making sure that she is there. So let's go to chapter Esther 2, down to verses 8 and 9. Okay. Now remember, Mordecai treated Esther like his own daughter. Okay. So that means he would have literally died for her. He would have done whatever it took to make sure she's taken care of. But listen to verse 8. It says that, so it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered in the citadel of Susa, into the custody of Hegai, that Esther was taken to the king's palace into the custody of Hegai, who was in charge of the women. Verse 9. Now the young lady pleased him and found her favor with him. So the first thing that Esther did was she found favor with the guy who was in charge. Okay? But who ultimately is in charge? God. Who ultimately is the one who is setting this up? God. Okay? All right? So I can't help it. I always think of when I hear the phrase here, and I'll read it to you. Verse 9. So the young lady, and it goes on, it says, so he quickly provided her with cosmetics and food. She was already beautiful. The Bible tells us she was already beautiful. Okay? And now, I guess they're going to try to perfect beauty. I don't know. I guess that's what they're going to try to do here. So it says here that she was so beautiful, guys. She caught the eye of this eunuch, of Hegai. She caught his eye that he gave her, it says, so he quickly provided with her cosmetics and food. Remember, he gave her 7 choice. Listen to this. She got her own servants, and she was nothing yet in the kingdom. Did you see that? Right there. It says 7 sent attendants from the king's palace and transferred her and her attendants to the best place in the harem. She went to the front of the line. I mean, God's not messing around here, is he? I mean, he is not messing around. He knows that she is going to have to, she has a specific purpose. Okay? And it's interesting here that God is going to use her beauty to accomplish this. I don't know if you notice that or not. He's using her beauty to accomplish this. Okay? I find it interesting. She was already beautiful without all the other stuff they put on her to make her beautiful.
Okay. Don't you think she had a great personality also?
I don't think the king, it's possible the king didn't care though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very sure, Carlos, it's possible, but the king didn't care.
You take the unit and why he treated her so special. It could be just because she was very nice to him and polite and gave him a little bit of respect where some of these others might not have.
That's possible, but that's very possible. But I just know the king said he wanted a virgin and a beautiful woman. Okay, that all I know. That's all. But that's right, Carlos. I think that part of us knows that beauty can be destroyed by an ugly personality, right? Okay, I completely understand what you're saying. But here we see that it's interesting. She went from literally a nobody. I mean, literally just another person in the kingdom who Mordecai saw this letter go out. Hey, you got to do this. Literally, that's what happened. Okay, and so now she's there, and she now has 7 choice female attendants, which means they're good. They know what they're doing. They're going to get her again. If it's possible, they're going to get even prettier than what she already was. Okay, that's what they're going to do here. And then look at this. It said that where did these attendants come from? Did you notice that? From the palace. I mean, these people probably had some clout about them. They probably knew some people. Okay? And so now, and now we go on here, that again, I always find it interesting. Every time I hear that word, that she is placed in the harem, the best place in the harem. I'm not sure what that means. Okay? I'm not sure what exactly that means, other than she's noticed. Okay? Again, we can try to play big, but I think that we'll leave it right there. Okay? So this is what it is. So now she is there. The keeper of the women was pleased. She was so beautiful. He put her through the regiment that she was given 7 servants to be taken care of. Okay? So he thought she was beautiful. There was something special about her. Was it her personality? We don't know. We most certainly know her looks. Okay? That we do know from the scripture. And now, so he's chosen her, and we have this. And I want you to notice something else. Okay? How many of you guys would rather be in the front of the line or the back of the line?
Depends on what's going on.
Okay?
It depends on the rewards.
Okay, all of you half empty people of a glass. Okay? When you're standing in line for something that you like, would you rather be at the end or the front? Why? Best choice.
Everybody wants what they want.
That's right. I'm going to get there first. I'm going to be able to beat you, or you're going to be able to beat me, right?
Make sure there's something there when I get there.
What's that, Carlos?
I want to make sure there's something there when I get there.
Sure. Absolutely. You know, it's kind of funny. It's like, I want to be the first person in line for the potluck, right? Make sure we get the first choice. Okay. I want you to notice something, though. Okay? In verse 9, what it says there, it says that there's a hierarchy within the harem. I don't know if you saw that or not, but that's exactly what it says. It says she was given the best place in the harem, which means there's other places. Okay? Maybe that was that these women had been 6 months in the regiment training, and this one's been 7. You know, whatever. I don't know what it was. But that indicates that there was some sort of a hierarchy even within the harem. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I can't even imagine being around a bunch of jealous people. Seriously, I mean, there had to be some jealousy because there's sin in the world, right? And there had to be some jealousy. That lady, I've been here for a year to move her up. She's not nearly as pretty as I am. Okay. I mean, think about this is what's happening here. I mean, this is God's hand, though, right? I mean, it's all God's hand. And I want you to think about our lives. God's hand is actively involved in our life. And sometimes He wants us at the front of the line. Sometimes He wants us in the middle, and sometimes He wants us at the end. It just totally depends on what's taking place and how God's going to use us. Okay? But God's going to use Esther, so He's got to push her to the front. Okay? She was born with a purpose. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question. Did they know that she was Jewish? And
No, we're
did it
going to get to
make
that in 1 second. Yeah, we'll
Did
get
it
to
make a
that.
difference in the time they were choosing?
No, it did not make a difference. That's correct. As far as they were concerned, she was just another person from province. Correct. Yes. Yeah. What's that, Ron?
I was caught my attention was that she was given. This is not someone seeking and trying to fight to get it done. She was given that position.
Because they knew what about it?
They recognized her beauty and probably her personality.
Yep.
And
God's grace.
God was doing it.
Yeah. God's sovereignty, right? God's in sovereign. He's in charge of everything. But Pat, to answer your question, go to verse 10.
I
Okay.
just got
Okay.
the
Yeah.
names, that's why.
Yep. Verse 10. In fact, we're going to do verses 10 and 11, then we'll close. Okay. Listen to what it says here. Esther did not reveal her people or her kindred because Mordecai had instructed her that she was not to reveal them. And every day Mordecai walked back and forth in front of the courtyard of the harem to learn how Esther was and what was happening to her. All right. How many of you, I know the answer to this question because I know the answer to the question for me. We're all in the same boat. How many of us can just walk through the fence at the White House and walk around the yard? I mean, you can. I know it's understanding. You can. It's just not a good idea, right? Because we don't belong there, do we? Yeah, right, exactly. You're going to wind up with something, right? Because we don't belong there, right? So I want us to think about this for just a moment. I want to keep going back to God's in control. I want to keep going back to this because Mordecai told Esther to not to do what? Don't tell anybody what? Who she was. Right, who she was. Isn't it interesting? To this very day, people still hate the Jews. Still hate God's people.
Well, one of the things here is, the Jews are in slavery.
Mm-hmm. Yep, they were kept, absolutely they were. Yes. And so now he says, don't say a word about who you are. Go down to verse, I never said we're going to look at verses 10, 11, but go down to verse 20. Esther still had not revealed her relatives or her people, just as Mordecai had instructed her, for Esther did what Mordecai told her, just as she said when under his care. So she was still under whose authority? Mordecai's. Not under this eunuch's authority. Mordecai's authority. And why? Obedience. But let's go even more than that. Why? Who was she? She was a Jew. She was a virgin. He was taking care of her family. He was taking care of her family. Mordecai was taking care of his family. And here's the deal. She respected that. Okay? She respected it. You know, many times kids don't understand the thing what their parents are doing, right? Everybody go like this, right? They don't. I remember as a kid, I didn't. Okay, I thought my dad was crazy. Some of the things he wanted me to do. But here we see a respect for Mordecai. You know, here we see, yeah.
Early on, I think back in verse 7 or so, this translation version says, he thought of her as his daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Brought her up as his daughter.
Absolutely, that's what it says. That's exactly what it says. It says he saw her as his own daughter. It means loved her, clothed her, took care of her, fed her. Everything that she needed, he did. Okay? And she respected him for that. That respect was there. Okay? I mean, even when she's in the harem, right? And verse 20 that I just read to you, chapter 2, she's right there. Okay? I mean, she is right there. And here's what's even more interesting to me. Mordecai, I don't think, maybe you can chime in if you like, it's perfectly fine. I don't think Mordecai had any idea what role Esther was going to play. Do you think? In the future?
No.
Okay. So, since I think, I agree, I don't think so. So, the whole idea here was Mordecai, Esther and Mordecai, God has chosen her, and it's potentially, if she reveals her identity, that they could remove her. Because like you said, they were slaves. I mean, literally, they were captives, right? And by the way, she's not lying. You know why she's not lying? Because the Bible never indicates here that she ever tell them where she was from.
If they don't ask.
Yep, exactly. You're not lying if you never asked. Literally, you're not. And so she was never asked about that. Mm-hmm.
How old do we think she was at this point?
Oh, you would have to ask that question. Because what I've read, I don't agree with. Okay? The Bible tells us he was looking for two characteristics of her. What was she supposed to be? Young and a virgin. I've heard people say, oh, she's 40 years old. I don't think that's young.
No.
Okay? In fact, I've heard it all the way up to 80 years old. Okay?
Take a look around, you find out there.
Okay. But I promise you this, one of the reasons that Carlos already mentioned it, he wouldn't have babies too. Right? How many 80-year-old ladies want to have another baby? Just asking for a friend. Just asking.
What if they're going to live to be 900 years old?
Okay? But these guys weren't going to live that old. But Ed, to answer your question, we really don't know. Obviously, the Bible says she was younger and a virgin. That we can say for certain. Yes.
If Mordecai was trying to get her to be positioned, elected as a queen, surely he had an idea if she was a queen that she'd have some kind of interest in her people when she got there.
Absolutely, you would think so. Sure.
Yeah, I think there's more to it than what we may be seeing here.
Yeah, I don't think he knew that she was going to save her people at this point. But I think that, you know, we don't, it doesn't make any sense to me some of the time things we say during political seasons. But every political candidate wants to do its best for who? Themselves. Right? Every one of them do. And they can tell you and I what they want to. But the reality is, you're right. If the possibility does exist, that's exactly what to do what's best for his people, which there's nothing wrong with that, right? There's no selfishness behind that. And so that's a good possibility. But we do know that how it takes place is not that case. It's usually because I want to get something out of it. I want to get something from you, or you want to get something from me. But that's not the case here. I think that Esther that Mordecai, because Ed, you're right, I think it's verse 7, is chapter 2, I believe so yes, it's verse 7 of chapter 2. He loved her like a daughter. He did. It tells us right there, he loved her like a daughter.
So did she voluntarily go for this? Or
was
she encouraged by Mordecai, or did they just come through and pick out women?
Well, accordingly, what we read here is that in verse 3 of chapter 2, it says, "And may the king appoint overseers in all the provinces of his kingdom and have them bring every beautiful young virgin." So that would indicate compulsion. Okay? That would indicate compulsion. But then if you go down further, though, Mordecai knew the edict, right? He knew what was going to happen. And it says there a little bit further down, trying to make sure I get the right verse here. But verse 7-ish, 6, I can't get the verses quick enough here. Who had taken from, again, they were taken from Jerusalem, the exiles had been deported. We know that Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had no father or mother, nor the young woman was beautiful in a form and a face. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her. I think that he, I think that he had more to do with, hey, this is what you need to do. Okay, I cannot say that Mordecai compelled her to do so. But most certainly that could have happened, because when we read another verse that could have happened. But I don't think in this case it did. Yes, sir.
But she was taking his advice.
Correct. Absolutely. She was following his lead. That's right.
So if that be the case, he didn't take him long to figure out that she was a good looking woman.
Correct.
So
Right.
why not have this Jewish lady take a chance on winning first place in the king's heart?
Sure.
And you know the queen is going to get persuasion to the king.
Yep. Absolutely. Sure.
At the same time, he provided.
Yep. Yeah. The whole thing is sovereignty. Rex, you're gonna say.
Didn't Isaiah tell them that when they wanted kings, or if they got kings, that the kings would take their sons and daughters?
Oh, wasn't I? It was Samuel. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. I was gonna say it was in 2 Samuel. No, it was Samuel.
So yes, none of these people had any say.
No. But again, I think Mordecai very much. I think you're right. But I think that Mordecai was aware of this. I think that Mordecai wanted to make sure she was taken care of. She was beautiful. We know that very clearly from the scriptures. I'm going against time, and I'm trying to find the verse as I was trying to find here for it. Go ahead, Ron.
Well, when you're in a situation that you can't change, you're probably going to counsel somebody to do the best they can. To accept it and make the best of it.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back a little bit more. Let's go to verse 8 for just a moment. Let's go to verse 8 of chapter 2. So it came about when the command and decree of the king were heard, and many young ladies were gathered to the citadel of Susa into the custody of Haggai. So that indicates there may not have been compulsion as well. It's just the first version that we read there, verse 3, it could have indicated compulsion to do so. And the other one reads there that they may have gone because with Mordecai saying she's beautiful, hey, let's go, right? And let's face it, if somebody's more, if for lack, I don't know if this is proper English, but if this person's more beautiful than this person, who are you going to try to push in front? The more beautiful person, right? And that's what happened with Esther. Okay, Bob, you going to say something? But I just want us to think about the whole idea, though, and Ed, you said it properly. Yeah, go ahead.
It's a fact that the king had already seen her once.
Right.
And supplied her with 7 women to modify her.
Well, the king may not have seen her, but the attendants most certainly did. Correct.
Somebody seen her and made sure she got the proper care.
Right. Well, God pushed her right up the front. But what I want us to learn from, we're going to close right there. What I want us to learn about so far, we'll get to start into chapter 12, verse 12 next week. What I want you to write down here is God's sovereignty. Right? God's in control. How he chose to do it, some people might say it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, there's a lot of things God did that, I know I wouldn't have done it the way he did. That's why we're not God, right? I'm not God. But you're right. We'll get some more into that. But it's really interesting, though, the decree, it didn't take long for her to move up. And it's going to take even less time for the king to really notice her. Okay?
You gotta remember, this whole thing was orchestrated by God.
Absolutely, yes. Absolutely. God's sovereignty is in charge. He knows exactly what he's doing. Like I said, from the day she was born, Ed, actually.
Yeah.
From the day she was born, right? This is what God was going to use her for. Okay? So we're gonna close right there. Okay?
Mordecai, he wasn't trying to do anything but provide the best life he
Yep.
could.
Yep, that's right. That's why we read from 1 Timothy.
And then
Exactly.
there was benefits that came along afterwards, but
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That was taking place. Yes, sir.
You said Esther was up, God moved her up.
Right. He moved her up, but she went pushed her right to the front of the line. Right? Literally to the front of the line. Because of how he made her. You know, she was beautiful. He was in control. Wouldn't it be great if we just let God be in control? He can move us up that way too. Right? I mean, he could do that. All right, we're going to close right there. I hope you're having some fun learning some new things here about this. Maybe I'm deliberately trying to give you a different angle of what happens here because of what the scriptures teach, so that we can see it. All right, let's take a moment. Let's pray. Father God, I thank you for your love. And Lord, I thank you for the fact that you're in control. That even as Esther moved straight on up to the top, Lord, you want to control our life too. I pray, Father God, that we'll let you. Lord, you're not out to hurt us, but to give us the best. And I thank you for that. Use your people. Lord, use us. And I ask these things in your name. Amen.